a teacher in the Kabbalist tradition. Yeah. So what I know about that is that when we have an opportunity to remember to bring forth our love, it may be that when we leave this place, it'll last for about this much time, and then pretty soon we're going to forget. We're going to forget that we're that God energy. We're going to forget who we really are. We're going to forget who the homeless guy in the street is. And we're not going to see the radiant divinity in ourselves or in the other person. And that's what we're talking about when we say that God blinks in and out, see? Because we are in this human condition, and stuff gets in the way. Stuff happens. We go through fundamental sorrows. We go through drama. We go through disappointments. We go through joys. We go through all of it because we're human beings. And sometimes in the process of what we're going through, guess what? We get forgetful. And we forget our divinity. We forget our radiance. And so this whole month, we're going to focus on this idea that because we are human beings, because we have this incredible essence of the divine within us, we have to cultivate the capacity to remember that more often than we forget it. And that's what this blinking is about. Because most of us have a pretty fixed idea of who we are, most of the time. We have, like Deepak Chopra says, we identify with our labels, with our name, with our gender, with our age, with our weight, with our hair color, whatever, with our culture. We're identifying with all of that, this fixed idea of, oh yeah, this is me. And the invitation this entire month is to say, yeah, that's my human self, and, both and, I want to open to this self with a big S, the self of myself, that is my divinity. And I want to be able to come from that place more often than not. We tend to blink in and out of realizing this. We tend to blink in and out of realizing our divinity. We get it, and then we lose it. You know what I mean? We remember, and then we forget. And it doesn't take a lot for that to go on in our human experience. This forgetting, this, losing it sort of thing. And so it's all about our perceptions. I love Glenda's discussion around her Christian upbringing and her perceptions as a child and as a young adult, because you realize, I'm sure, that this discussion that we're having about I'm God and so are you is a big giant stretch for an awful lot of people, especially people who come from fundamental backgrounds, fundamental traditions of one sort or another. This concept that I am God expressing is very foreign. In fact, it's blasphemous to some. It's insulting, it's rude, it shows a lack of reverence to some folks, this idea that I am that. And so it's a big stretch for a lot of folks. Those of us that have found our way to this place know that about ourselves. Yes, we forget, but we do know about it. But it's very hard. We can't, I tell you what, if you go out in the street and you go to the person that you buy a Subway sandwich from and say, guess what, I'm God. You're probably gonna have a little pushback, like what? Just doing a little research on the internet, of course, the way we always do to prepare for our talks, to see what other people are saying about these things. And I went to a fundamental Christian website because I wanted to see just how bad it would be to hear that, I'm God. And this is a quote from a fundamental Christian website. It says, when it comes to God, all people everywhere have the same basic problem with him. He's God, and we're not. Of course, each of us wishes that we were God. So this idea that he's God and we're not is very prevalent in a lot of people's minds. And so it's sort of a stretch. We've got to really open up our boundaries and realize not everybody's going to understand this the same way that we do. But you know what the truth is, and Glenda talked about her Christian upbringing, if that's your path, and I know it is your path for many of you, do you know both the Old and the New Testament? If you're a literal interpreter of the Bible, you should have figured this out, because in Psalms, the words of God say, I have said ye are gods. I have said ye are gods. And all of you are children of the Most High. And then later on in the New Testament, Jesus reminds the people, he says, Is it not written in your law, I have said you are gods? So we forget, you see. We get to be selective about where we place our attention around these things. So I believe that we all are coming from the same understanding. It's just that we're interpreting it in different ways. And so here at Common Ground, we teach what many, many, many master teachers teach in many spiritual traditions. That there is God, there is divinity, there is this energy of God everywhere present, available to every single person, and it doesn't matter whether you're a saint or a sinner, as defined by your culture, whatever that looks like. We all have the same amount of God stuff within us. We are all the same God stuff. We express in unique ways, but that's very hard to see out there in the world. And when we're not clear about who we are, it's hard to see that about ourselves. It's hard to see that about ourselves. But this entire idea of being God is to look within, not up there in the sky, not someplace else, but to recognize that this God energy is right here within. And so I put up the image of the nesting dolls, the Russian nesting dolls. I happen to collect Russian lacquerware, and I have a gift from a mother and daughters that came to stay with us one summer on an exchange program from Russia. And they brought this lovely little nesting doll. And the thing is, this is us. This is my fixed identity, you see. But when you look at the way a nesting doll works, no matter how many times you take, whoops, oh, that finger, what are you putting into it? No matter how many times you take the doll apart, you just keep getting down, 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 and eventually you just get down to this tiny little core essence that is, within the fixed identity from the exterior. We get to that, and then, oh, there it is. See? There it is. And we're so focused and fixated on this out here. But it's this inner self that we really want to look at. Glenda mentioned about the three kind of friends. Ken Wilber tells us that we always already are that. We always already are that God essence. It's that stardust that Carl Sagan talks about. We've never not been that. We've never not been this God energy. Never. I love what Deepak Chopra said in the very end of his video. You and I are all gods. Anything less in our perception is a compromise. We're it, folks. We're it. But then here's the question. How do we relax into this experience and have a genuine, passionate relationship with the fundamental uncertainty and dilemma of walking around in a people suit as a human being and expressing this incredible radiance and divinity that we are? How do we get comfortable with that? How do we stabilize in this blinking experience between our humanity and our divinity? How do we embrace the chaotic, dynamic nature of life that comes just, most of it uninvited, as I've said many, many times? How do we embrace that in a way that supports us in our remembering the truth of our divinity? That's a big issue, see. And part of it is in this deep surrender. I love the song that was playing during the prelude before Robert got here. I'm going to pull in the oars of my tiny boat and surrender to the isness of life. Oh, this is what it means to be human and divine at the same time. Relax into it. We get so wound up. What is it? Knickers in a knot? We get so bound up in wondering about these things that we don't surrender to the isness of the experience. We have to be able to draw aside the veil, as the master teachers talk about, this veil that gets in the way so that we can see deeper, so that we can see with soft eyes into the experiences that we're having, so that we can actually penetrate the hard, fixed aspect of whatever it is, ourselves the other, the experience, so that we can see within that to the soft, tender center that is the essence of the experience where God is. And we have to become more interested in that than we are in the drama and the chaos that's showing up. And that's a big, big, big spiritual practice. Because most of us are very distracted, like I was with the problem with the microphone. We get very distracted by the slightest little thing, and all of a sudden we're forgetful. And so it has to be more important to us to be able to move deeply into an experience than to stay on the surface of the drama. Boy, don't we all, you know, if we didn't all love drama so much, there wouldn't be so many reality shows on TV. It's true, it's true. And then, when we're in these experiences and we're able to go, this is what it is to be human and divine in this experience called life. When we're able to relax into that experience, we have to be courageous enough to invite whatever that thing is that's showing up, either our own self-perception or the drama itself. We've got to invite it to stick around long enough that we get it, that we can see through it. That's the hard part, that we can actually see through whatever that thing is and actually see the divinity within that and know our own divinity through that, so that it can inform us, can help us with our spiritual mastery, teach us something. Sit down, relax, and enjoy the ride. Because that's what we're here to do as human beings. And it's not always comfortable, and it's not always easy. But the bottom line is, and we've said this many times from this platform, how my life shows up is my responsibility. I get to decide where I place my attention. I get to decide if I'm looking deeply or if I'm staying on the surface of my experiences. I get to decide how my life shows up and the perceptions that I bring to it. Now the drama that outpictures, well, that's a whole other layer, a whole other story. But when stuff shows up, I really have to take time to breathe into the experience and say, which I self am I bringing to this experience? Am I bringing my my human self, my fixed identity, my fixed perception of myself? Or am I bringing my I-ness, my total essence to this experience and bringing that perception? So it depends a lot when we're talking about God blinking in and out, this perception of God blinking in and out. It depends a lot on who's looking. If I'm looking through the eyes of my human ego self, it's going to look very different than if I'm looking through the soft eyes of love or the divine that Glenda talked about. It's going to look very different. And so really, no matter what's going on, we have to ask ourselves in every moment, how does life look to me right now, and who's looking? Who's looking? Where am I coming from? What's my point of reference? What's my perspective? Because it depends on who's looking as to whether or not we're coming from that very human part of ourselves, and we will, or we're coming from that divine part of ourselves. Got to check in with ourselves. Am I remembering who I am right now, or am I forgetting? Have I got it, or did I lose it? We have to be able to ask ourselves those questions. Because when we are in this sense of great love, like Linda talked about, this place of peace, this place of acceptance, this place of stillness, we're probably remembering. We're probably connecting with the energy of our divine selves. But guess what? If we're blinking into anger, jealousy, vanity, hatefulness, harmfulness, being unhappy, being upset, being arrogant, being offended by everything that goes on around us, chances are we've blinked into forgetfulness. We've blinked into that area that's not remembering the truth of who we are. We've bought into that other stuff, and we all do it. And that's why this is such an important talk, because we must give ourselves permission to simply recognize when we go to those places, so that we can go, oh, this is what it feels like. This is how it feels to be human and divine. Okay, my divinity cannot be tarnished. My divinity cannot be diminished. My divinity cannot be in any way destroyed or tainted. But my humanity can sure show up weird. So here's your invitation as we close. Sit down, relax, enjoy the ride. We're on a human experience here. And every single one of us has a unique God self at the core of this human experience. And we have to remember that it is very human of us to blink in and out of remembering who we are. And we have to give ourselves permission. We have to forgive ourselves. We have to say, well, and redo it. Do it again. Remember that we're always going to get it and we're going to lose it. We're going to remember and we're going to forget. Ah, yes. This is what it means to be human and divine. That's really what we're talking about here, is the remembering that we are all of it. Thank you for listening.